Venezuela crisis. Is the U.S. ready for a direct military confrontation? The situation around Venezuela has now become not just an internal crisis within a single country, but a complex issue closely intertwined with regional and global geopolitical processes. The lack of a clear, understandable, and consistent plan of action by the U.S. on the backdrop of increased military rhetoric and demonstrations of force makes the situation even more uncertain. This increases the risk of unexpected clashes and has brought the current situation to a frozen but unstable stage. Recent developments show that the factor of surprise has practically disappeared. The fact that the development of the situation and possible scenarios were widely discussed in the public space gave all sides time to adapt. As a result, the Venezuelan side was able to strengthen its defense capabilities, intensify external relations, and prepare asymmetric measures against possible pressures. This fundamentally changes the nature of the potential conflict, increasing the likelihood of a long-term, complex, and difficult-to-control conflict instead of a short-term military operation. A factor that further complicates the situation is the expansion of external military and military technical involvement. The involvement of foreign military experts, private military structures, and proxy actors is turning the Venezuelan crisis into an arena of indirect competition between external players. This increases the cost of military mistakes and reduces the predictability of the development of events. At the same time, the prolongation of decision-making is increasingly increasing the political and military cost of any possible action. The regional impact of the processes is also becoming increasingly evident. The uncertainty in the approach of the main external actors is perceived by Latin American countries as a weakening of traditional strategic deterrence mechanisms. This is creating the basis for the adoption of more aggressive positions by some regional leaders, as well as the formation of alternative political configurations that rely on external forces. Therefore, the Venezuelan crisis is becoming not only a military issue, but also a matter of political influence and prestige of states. In the short and medium term, the situation is likely to develop in several main directions. First of all, the likelihood of direct and large-scale military intervention around Venezuela remains low, since the political, military, and economic costs of such a scenario are very high, and the results are not guaranteed in advance. Therefore, an approach based on pressure and restraint rather than the use of force is expected to prevail. In this process, military demonstrations, sanctions, and diplomatic pressure tools will be used as the main mechanisms of influence. At the same time, the possibility of the situation continuing in the form of indirect confrontation remains. Influence through external actors, the use of asymmetric means, and the strengthening of proxy mechanisms will not allow the crisis to be completely alleviated in the short term. However, it cannot be said that the diplomatic path is completely closed. The negotiation process is expected to develop slowly and intricately through political bargaining and mediation mechanisms rather than an open military confrontation. In the current circumstances, it is difficult to say that the United States is fully prepared, both politically and strategically, for a direct military confrontation with Venezuela. The current situation is based more on a show of force and restraint, and the likelihood of a large-scale military scenario remains relatively low. At the same time, the lack of a clear political solution and exit strategy keeps the situation in a state of long-term instability and perpetuates risks throughout the region.